The Washington Post, owned by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, announced it was cutting approximately a third of its employees, the biggest hits coming to sports, books, and metro sections. The Post also shuttered several foreign bureaus, and all Middle East correspondents and editors have been laid off. When Bezos purchased the Post, he told reporter Bob Woodward, quote, "I finally concluded that I could provide runway, financial runway, because I don't think you can keep shrinking the business. You can be profitable and shrinking, and that's a survival strategy, but ultimately leads to irrelevance at best, and at worst, it leads to extinction," unquote. People are also calling out Bezos and Amazon amidst these layoffs after their recent purchase of Melania, the documentary about First Lady Melania Trump. Amazon paid $40 million for the title and a further $35 million for marketing of it. Also, Amazon also recently revealed plans to spend $200 billion on artificial intelligence this year.
Sam, are you telling me that the Washington Post can't afford to keep on its beloved vital journalists, but could spend $75 million on the Melania, essentially a irrelevant, nauseating infomercial, but could spend $200 billion on AI?
Pretty sad.
That is really sad. And this is not limited to the Washington Post. We are witnessing the end of the golden age of independent media. Our media is now become subject to billionaires like Jeff Bezos or the billionaire owner of
Is it Bezos or Bezos?
I have no idea.
We've gone through this debate a million times.
Yeah, Bezos. Let's call him Bezos.
Sure, let's do a poll.
Yeah.
I'll do a phonetic spelling of Bezos and Bezos. Sorry to interrupt. We've had this debate for forever now.
Yeah. Now I sort of forgot where I was. Oh, yeah. Our media is dying, our once great independent media, because it's falling under the control of billionaires like Jeff Bezos, or the owner of the Los Angeles Times, or corporate entities like, isn't it now Paramount that owns CBS, Sam?
Yes.
And Disney owns ABC?
Yes.
Yes. Now, the problem goes beyond the individuals who are the billionaires or are the heads of these corporations. It's systematic, and that's what makes it, Sam, so incredibly dangerous. Even if the best people were heading up these entities, there would still be an enormous problem because of the deep conflicts of interest. There is a deep reason why Jeff Bezos is killing off the Washington Post. And it's not necessarily that he's a bad man. I don't know if he's a good man or a bad man, but I do know that Bezos, other billionaires, and corporate heads, the last thing they want is a vigorous, independent, investigative media. They want to do whatever they want without criticism, analysis, or interference from a truly independent press. There's way too much money at stake for them to want a vigorous free press functioning in America. And that's what's so scary, because it's systematic. It's built into what's happening to our media and cannot be attributed to the ill intentions, even though they may have them, of individual owners or individual heads of these corporations. The conflict of interest is fundamental and inherited. And by the way, we could see the handwriting on the wall for the Washington Post long before this recent round of cuts, right, Sam?
Tell me. I don't know.
I'll tell you. First of all, where does he recruit his top leadership from? His CEO, Will Lewis, his editorial head, Matt Murray. Where'd they come from?
I don't know.
The Murdoch
Did
world.
they?
Yes.
Oh,
they
God.
worked for Rupert Murdoch before they were hired by the Washington Post.
That's scary.
And you know, we pointed this out at the time. You got to have some suspicion that these folks, given their background, these folks, you know, advisedly chosen by Jeff Bezos, might not have a firm commitment to maintaining the traditions of the Washington Post, that they may have, no matter how they may mouth their platitudes, they may have a very different agenda. And before these layoffs, we were already seeing the evisceration of the Washington Post, you know, that helped expose the Watergate scandal, that helped release the Pentagon Papers.
I learned today that the Watergate scandal was first revealed in the Metro section, actually, which is part of the major cuts.
The Metro section has been eviscerated. You know, one of their correspondents says she's in the middle of a war zone in Kyiv, and she gets this message that she's been fired.
Crazy.
It's just been absolutely crazy. But it was foreshadowed not only by the hiring of top leaders from the Murdoch world, you know, which is not exactly a world in sync with the traditions of the Washington Post, but Bezos kills, right? We all know about this, the editorial endorsing Kamala Harris at the 11th hour, right before the election, you know, an extraordinary partisan intervention on the part of the ownership of a newspaper that wiped out the independence that's supposed to exist between editorial and ownership. Obviously, an owner can do whatever the owner wants. But if you want to have a great newspaper, you can't have the owner meddling in editorial decisions. You know, that's just a disaster. And then he goes beyond that in messing up the editorial pages of the Washington Post, turning them into much more of a pro-Trump propaganda organization, and killing, to a great extent, not entirely, but killing pieces critical of Donald Trump and killing pieces critical of American capitalism, American corporatism, and American billionaires. Again, a palpable, extreme conflict of interest that is built in, that's inherent, and that is absolutely frightening, because there's no easy answer to this. You know, you're not going to divest Bezos of the Post or the billionaire of the LA Times or the big corporations of the major television news outlets. It's not going to happen. And that means, you know, our major sources of news that were once so independent and so significant are being killed off right before our eyes. You know, look what's happening at CBS. It's been a disaster ever since the Trump-oriented Barry Weiss, with the approval of the corporate masters, took it over. Just doesn't work to have supposed independent media controlled, influenced, throttled by those with massive conflicts of interest that do not comport with the interests of a free press or the interests of the American people. I remind you of what the great Thomas Jefferson once said: given a choice between a free government and a free press, I will pick the free press, because you can't have a free government without a free press.
You know, I agree that our platform here and other YouTubers, streamers, online content creators are a possible solution to this massive void that's being left in the Washington Post. But I also feel like, you know, what we do here, we're not really journalists, you know. There's going to still be, you know, the Washington Post, no matter who owns it, for a long time has been filled with really great journalists, you know, working around the clock to find stories, to fact check, to, you know, I'm afraid that, again, while, you know, shows like this can help, I don't think it's going to replace the Washington Post, and it's going to be a massive, and as these beacons of journalism and democracy decline, I'm not exactly sure that the internet is here to save us necessarily.
I have to agree with you, Sam, because we're limited. We don't have the staff
Exactly, right.
of the Washington Post. We're not investigative reporters. We can
Right.
give you analysis.
Right.
We can give you opinions. We can tell you what's behind the news. But we can't do the essential job that outlets like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, what's it called now? I don't know. NBC Now, even Fox can do. We're just two of us. These folks have hundreds and hundreds of staff members. And the most critical thing they do, I think, even beyond the opinion journalism, is investigative journalism, which is, of course, anathema to the powers that be. They hate that. What did Richard Nixon, who tried to control and manipulate our democracy, hate the worst? He even set up a group called the Plumbers to control it. What did he hate the worst, Sam? Leaks. He wanted to control all the information. We tend to denigrate and condemn leaks, but leaks are essential. Leaks are how you find out what's going on in the inside of administrations like that of Richard Nixon and Donald Trump. That's why Donald Trump also is so terrified of leaks, because he doesn't want you to know what's going on. And you and I are not going to be able to uncover the inside of what's going on in the Trump administration. It takes major outlets with big financing and hundreds and even thousands of staff members to do this. And if you're killing that off, you are killing off an essential element of our democracy, something that Thomas Jefferson prized above all.
The other thing I fear is that a lot of the online political talking heads and discourse is just so toxic. And a lot of folks online, present themselves as journalists, but they're not really journalists. And, they're out to get clicks, and they sensationalize stuff like that guy, Nick Shirley, who's this right-wing journalist, the right wing loves right now. I mean, that's what we're going to have to rely on instead of great journalists at the Washington Post. It's frightening.
It's really frightening, and it's not just him. You're right. It's all over the place. The right wing is put out through these internet outlets all kinds of misinformation about Alex Preddy, including the lie that he was fired for sexual harassment. Add to this the problem of AI, Sam.
Right.
That they've been putting out all kinds of phony, fake, concocted AI images. And how in the world is an ordinary consumer going to judge that and expose it? That's why you need outlets like the Washington Post with real resources, experienced journalists, the ability to uncover the truth. Guys like us, we can do a lot, but we can't do that.
And, the reason why I put the last line of my intro as Amazon revealing plans to spend $200 billion on artificial intelligence, it's scary, the contrast of what's happening in our world right now. Again, firing everyday great journalists in favor of artificial intelligence, like you said, which put out a lot of junk and a lot of misinformation. And you're looking at these trends, where's the money going? It's leaving the Washington Post and going to AI. That doesn't make me hopeful.
Remember what we always say around here, Sam, right? Follow the money.
Yeah.
That will tell you the real priorities and what's really going on. And, $200 billion to zero pretty well defines the priorities of Amazon, does it not?
Right.
As well as, of course, toadying up and currying favor with the Trump administration. They would probably do that with any administration because, Amazon so heavily depends upon good relations with whatever administration happens to be in power at the time. And that's completely corrupting of independent journalism.
And, in 2013, when Bezos bought the Washington Post, I give him credit for putting his money behind good journalism. But it was easy to do in 2013, you know? Now, it's really hard to stand up behind good journalism, to stand up in front of this Trump administration. That's when brave people rise, is when there's real adversity and they still have to stick up for their morals. And Jeff Bezos and people like him are showing that they are cowards, because when push comes to shove and when good journalism and the truth is in its lowest point maybe in recent American history, they fold and they are cowards.
And that's just the opposite of what the Washington Post represented during the Watergate era, when they were exposing the evils of the Nixon administration. They were threatened, just like, even more explicitly than the Post leadership may be threatened today. Remember, there's that famous line of the henchman for Richard Nixon coming out and saying to Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Post, "We're going to put your tit through the ringer," kind of signifying, these awful Nixon henchmen threatening the Post. But did she cave in, Sam?
No.
Absolutely not. She stood up for true independent journalism, even with the threats from John Mitchell, who, by the way, was a former Attorney General of the United States. This was not some minor functionary. This was that chairman of the CREEP, the Committee for Re-electing the President, and the former Attorney General of the United States, vulgarly and explicitly threatening the publisher of the Post, and she did not cave. And her anatomy remained intact, by the way.
A lot of people in the chat are citing people online that they really like. Adam Mockler, David Pakman, Brian Tyler Cohen.
I like them
Don
too.
Lemon, Mary Trump. And those people are all fine and well. But again, these are different mediums. And we're talking about sort of online political personalities versus journalists. I don't know if they're the same thing.
They're not the same
And I'm not
thing.
saying Adam Mockler doesn't call out Trump. And he does, right? But Adam Mockler is not a one-to-one comparison to the journalist at the Washington Post. I'm sorry, he's just not. And
of course not. No, he no more than we do. He can't do investigative journalism. All he can do is put out his opinions.
Right. So, all those people...
And there's so much on the other side.
Right. All those people are good and well, but, most of those people are mentioning are mostly analysts. They're not journalists. And that's what scares me, because journalist is a very specific job, and it's a very important job. You agree?
Couldn't agree more. That's the thrust of what we're saying. There isn't, and I repeat that, a easy replacement for the indispensable journalism that we once saw from the Washington Post or the LA Times or CBS News. There is no replacement. Talking heads on the internet are fine and good, but they are not a replacement. That's the point we've got to stress. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.